honest. I just finished a playthrough and I was crying.
No! God, please, no! 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 So, The Last of Us 2. Oh boy, what is there to say that has not been said a million times? And I guess for those who have been under a rock for the past week, just so you know here, The Last of Us 2 has recently had all of its major plot points released through a, I guess, expository leak that was released on YouTube at some time. I'm not quite sure what happened there. But the fallout from that has been absolutely palpable, to say the absolute least. I mean, look at all the videos online right now. I mean, prior to this leak, all the videos about The Last of Us 2 were pretty much singing praise, and all of the advertisements and content they released for it was getting pretty well received. Then this happened, and then it's just no one has been happy since. All of the life has been drained from this vessel. And, I mean, there is probably some good reason here. So what we're going to do is that we're going to talk about the actual leaks themselves, the plot points and whatnot in vague terms. We're going to talk about the response from the company, and then we're going to talk about some like weird miscellaneous things that were happening with the community. So let's get started. So to get the actual meat and potatoes of this plot, like I said, keeping this vague, let me just drop a little hint though. Remember that Superman versus Batman movie in which it was all kind of around hate and revenge, and how both of them kind of just had a very negative vibe about each other until, you know, Batman said, "Save Martha," and the whole thing was just over instantaneously? It's kind of like that without the "Save Martha" part. It's probably going to be done just about as tactfully too, which doesn't bode well. I mean, when I was listening to all the leaks and people talking about this on forums, all I could think about was that Batman versus Superman film, and I was like, it's not a good comparison to go right off the bat. Not to mention that I was pairing this also with a couple of articles, like the one from Kotaku, where Neil Druckmann, the creative director at Naughty Dog, was talking about the major themes of this second game being mostly revolving around hate and revenge, and how revenge gets revenge, and how that turns into this parasitic, cyclical nature that ends up consuming both parties and creating a lot of hurt in the process. I was like, yep, it's just getting more and more confirmed. Not to mention, when those cinematics, when I actually started watching them and seeing them appear on Twitter, yeah, it was all but confirmed. I mean, wow, were they a bloody, gruesome mess in those cinematics. To the point of it almost just seeming uncharacteristic. Because you have to remember, a lot of people are approaching these cinematics, a lot of these leaks, from the context and the perspective of the characters from the first game itself, at the end of the story, where Joel saved Ellie from the Fireflies because the Fireflies are going to sacrifice Ellie in order to save the human race. But Joel made a decision to save his essentially adopted daughter instead, because that brought him more happiness in the world, especially in this really, really depressing world. And you really felt for it, and you really felt the conflict, especially considering that you were damning the human race in order to essentially save your daughter that you've grown attached to over the course of this game. And that makes sense that one character would go that route. And then just to see it all pay off in these cinematics in the second film, you're like, wow, I feel like all of my emotions about these two characters have just been absolutely beaten to death. I mean, just, wow, what, their emotions just crushed, essentially. Just to be a bit vague about it. And it's to the point where I guess a lot of people would be rightly angry, because it does not feel these characters were done justice in a way. But like I said, that could also just be the way it was intentionally designed, because maybe the whole point of it was to be shocking, to be provocative, to be this snuff film essentially of blood and gore, of essentially distilled hatred, which I suppose can be done. Doesn't mean necessarily everyone's gonna like it, but if that's your artistic choice, I suppose. We're going to have to see how that turns out in terms of sales, which is probably why they had to announce that it went gold after this whole controversy, because they were trying to reassure their investors. We see behind you, Neil Druckmann. But like I said, I'm going to have to keep it as vague there. It's definitely been causing a lot of fallout, and a lot of people are definitely not enthused about these plot points, as evident by the fact that if you look up The Last of Us 2 now, pretty much all the videos are pretty much just talking about how they do not like the direction of this game, how they do not like the plot points of this game. And you know what? you know what? They're entitled to their opinion, and I just want to see how this turns out in sales. But that's just one aspect of this whole thing. There actually is a second aspect of this, and that is the company's response, and I'm referring to specifically Sony and Naughty Dog. Because the thing is that the leaks and the spoilers, that's one issue. Set that aside. A second issue has cropped up. That being where Sony and Naughty Dog have been aggressively taking down any content, especially the leaked content with regards to the spoilers, the cinematics, the art, the gameplay, pretty much anything that was leaked, they're trying to get it peeled off the internet. And if you know anything about the internet, once it's up there, it's pretty much up there forever. And when you try to take it down as fast as possible, all it ends up doing is creating more of an allure to this information, thus disseminating it out even further. Not to mention that they've also had a secondary issue with YouTube. But just to get this out of the way, a company has the right to protect its intellectual property. They have the right to enforce their copyright protection on cinematics, on artwork they have, on official trailers, and all of this. And that's fine. If people are just wholesale copying and then re-uploading it and monetizing it, that's one thing. But there has been a separate issue where people who have been simply discussing the leaks, maybe showing one or two stills from the game itself, just to get, some background information on the whole thing, have been met with some pretty hard takedowns. I mean, I have a video posted up here, and I'll show a little screenshot, where actually someone got a full copyright takedown on one of their videos just because they showed a single still within their video. And there's been plenty of other Twitter threads of people, saying, hey, I was just discussing the leaks with no visual aid, and all of a sudden I get this copyright from this random group called Muso, which apparently is the one that's enacting out Sony's copyright protection on YouTube. And the thing is that for one, it's borderline illegal because fair use is a thing. It protects commentary, criticism, and parody, along with a bunch of other things. So by all means, as long as these YouTubers theoretically stayed within the bounds of fair use, they should all be protected by this. But the issue is that a lot of these online copyright enforcement platforms, they tend not to have the best reputation, especially considering that most of these tend to shoot first and then ask questions later, especially considering there's usually very little repercussion for a lot of these people, especially considering that most YouTubers live paycheck to paycheck pretty much and do not have a lot of money to spend on a $100,000 legal case just so that Muso and Sony can stop messing around with copyright protection on YouTube. So, not to mention, I understand why Sony is trying to be super aggressive because this just leaked out into the world and it's causing a huge effect probably on their sales. I mean, we don't really know the actual official numbers, but by the fact they had to release multiple statements, Neil Druckmann making a personal video discussing how this game is doing well financially and how he's trying to reassure. She's like, play the game, you'll understand it when you play the game. That doesn't bode well, and I can see why, because the company right now, it does seem like they are very, very, very nervous. So I can see why they're trying to do this, but in the end, they just end up hurting a bunch of people, and I'm not a big fan of that. As a small content creator myself, I've already dealt with an immense amount of copyright issues already, and I'm not even monetized on this platform. Like, I legit get copyright claims left, right, and center, false copyright and community guidelines violations for BS. It's not honestly the best situation to be in, especially when I try my utmost to be within copyright. But yeah, I feel for these content creators, and honestly, Sony, I understand what you're trying to do here, but the thing is that enacting such harsh and stringent enactment of your copyright policy here, it's just going to end up disseminating all these leaks out further. Not to mention, it's just going to tarnish your reputation. I mean, Naughty Dog already has a pretty poor reputation due to the massive crunch time as mentioned before, so this is just going to stack right on top of it nicely. And by nicely, I mean pretty poorly. But there's also another thing I also want to talk about, and that's like with some weird secondary issues of people bringing up old Neil Druckmann speeches where he was talking about Anita Sarkeesian videos and various progressive talking points where he's talking about the sexual objectification of female characters in a video game and how that may have actually impacted the development of this video game. And from what I understand, I'm not quite sure how this could actually interact with it. I mean, I can understand because he maybe goes into like the character design of the models, but the thing is that really the game itself never really appeared to have this hell-bent progressive twinge to it. I feel like a lot of people are just end up actually trying to find things to dislike about the studio, about the creative director, and about the game. when it's not necessarily justified, because while there are examples of overt political messaging within art forms such as video games, there's not necessarily present in this one, at least not to my knowledge. I mean, I guess you could make a argument with the optional DLC that explored Ellie's sexuality, but at the same time, I mean, doesn't really seem to be pushing anything narratively other than just like, here's a character's development, here's a character coming of age story, here's their exploration. That's really it. It's not like, oh, here is this poorly done political messaging in the vein that is just kind of insulting and belittling to the character's intelligence. No, it doesn't really come off as that. So how this actually impacted the game is kind of hard to say and not really explicitly overt. Now, there may be some niche articles out there where Neil Druckmann's saying, yes, we did this route specifically because of this thing. I haven't found anything like that specifically. So I'm just guessing a lot of this dirt that is being drug up on Neil Druckmann's past, especially with regards to Anita Sarkeesian, the progressive thought patterns, it's most likely just dirt to be dirt. So I would just keep that in mind if you're ever going to try to hear a bunch of people talking about how this is just becoming, a propagandist video game. It doesn't really seem that to be the case. There seems to be more fundamental issues regarding the writing as opposed to the messaging of this game, if you will, even though I guess they might be in the same, but different. You all know what I mean. But that's kind of all my thoughts about this game. Let me know what you guys think down below. What did you guys think about the brand new Last of Us 2 leaks? And let me know what you thought about the state of the company. And tell me if you guys are actually excited for this game to come out now. Have any of you changed your minds? Have any of you canceled your pre-orders? Let me know down below, and I'll see if I can answer all your questions. Other than that, guys, I want to thank you all for joining me this evening. If you had fun, follow whatever platform is your favorite. Other than that, guys, I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.